Did Grandma's hot chocolate warm you up? Good. This is the tall book of nursery rhymes. This used to be Grandma's when she was a little girl. It's very old. And here is the first picture. And the first story is called Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, in a cottage, on the edge of a deep woods, lived a little girl and her mother. The little girl always wore a little red cape her grandmother had made for her, with a little red cover to cover her curls. So the neighbors called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Red Riding Hood's mother put a loaf of crusty brown bread and some spiced meat and a bottle of red wine into a basket and said to her, "I want you to take these goodies to your grandmother who is sick. But be sure that you go straight along the woods path and do not stop to play or talk to any strangers." Little Red Riding Hood promised to be careful. She put on her little cape and hood, took the little basket, and off she started. She loved the walk through the shady green woods where all the flowers and the birds and the little animals lived. But today she did not stop to play with any of her forest friends. She kept right on the path. Suddenly, from behind a big oak tree, a great gray wolf appeared. He was an evil-looking fellow, but he smiled at Little Red Riding Hood and said politely, "Good morning, my dear. And where are you going this fine day?" "My grandmother is sick, and I am going to her little cottage in the woods to take her this basket from my mother. And my mother says I am not to stop and play along the way or speak to strangers." "Always obey your mother, my dear," said the wolf, eyeing Little Red Riding Hood himself hungrily. "Now I do not want to delay you, since you have a long way to go, so good day." With a little bow, the wolf disappeared among the trees, and Red Riding Hood skipped along toward her grandmother's house. The wicked wolf, meanwhile, had taken a shortcut through the woods, and he reached the grandmother's cottage long before Little Red Riding Hood. "Who is there?" called the grandmother, who was still in bed. "It is I, Little Red Riding Hood," said the wolf, trying to make his voice sound soft and sweet. "Come in, my dear," said the grandmother. "Just pull the latchstring." So the wolf pulled the latchstring and slipped into the grandmother's cottage, and he ate her up in one big bite. Then he put on her nightgown and her nightcap and climbed into her bed. He was just pulling the sheet up over his nose when Little Red Riding Hood rapped at the door. "Who is there?" called the wolf, trying to make his voice sweet and quavery. "It is I, Little Red Riding Hood," said the little girl. "Come in, my dear," said the wolf. "Just pull the latchstring." So Red Riding Hood went in and put her little basket down on the table. "Now come closer, my dear," said the wolf. "Why, Granny, what big ears you have!" cried Little Red Riding Hood, walking closer. "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf. "And Granny, what big eyes you have!" cried Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to see you with, my dear," said the wolf. "And Granny, what big teeth you have!" "The better to eat you with," snapped the wolf, springing at Little Red Riding Hood. Calling for help, she ran out of the cottage and straight into the arms of a sturdy woodcutter. He stepped into the cottage and with one blow of his axe killed the wicked wolf. He cut him open, and out stepped Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother, none the worse for her fright. She kissed Little Red Riding Hood warmly and thanked the woodcutter for saving their lives. Then, after all had a nice lunch from the goodies in Little Red Riding Hood's basket, the woodcutter took the little girl home. There has never been another wolf seen in that forest. But Little Red Riding Hood takes no chances. She keeps right on the path, does not stop to play along the way, and never speaks to strangers. Are you asleep, dear?